The room was too quiet for the kind of news she was receiving. She sat across from a man she barely knew, nodding while her heart raced. His words sounded distant, like they were meant for someone else. She stared at his moving lips, waiting for the sentence to change. It never did, and something inside her went completely still. When we watch stories of resilience and new beginnings, we reflect, awaken, and may take steps that help us become happier and more fulfilled. I hope you enjoy this story of renewal, feel inspired by it, and join us. I'm curious, tell me where you're listening to, watching me from. 32 years elapsed into a single paragraph spoken without emotion. Her achievements, her sacrifices, her loyalty were summarized in seconds. She wanted to interrupt, to remind him of everything she had built, but her voice refused to cooperate. Trapped somewhere behind her ribs, she signed papers with a hand that no longer felt like her own. Walking out of the building felt like leaving a body behind. The hallway lights seemed brighter, almost cruel in their normality. People passed her without knowing she had just lost her name. She forced a polite smile, performing one last time out of habit. The doors closed behind her with a sound that echoed too long. She sat in her car without starting the engine. Her phone buzzed with emails that suddenly meant nothing. The steering wheel felt cold, unfamiliar, like it belonged to a stranger. For the first time in decades, there was nowhere she needed to be. Freedom was supposed to feel lighter than this. At home, she placed her keys on the counter slowly. The house greeted her with silence instead of routine. No meetings, no deadlines, no reason to rush dinner. She stood there, unsure of what came next. The clock kept moving, unconcerned with her unraveling. That night, sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, searching for mistakes. She wondered how something so central could vanish so quickly. Her chest tightened with the fear she had never learned to name. Without her job, the question felt dangerous and loud. Who am I now, if I am no longer needed? The thought stayed with her as the room grew darker. She turned on her side, hoping morning would bring clarity. Instead, it brought the same heavy silence. Something had ended, but nothing had begun. Morning arrived without urgency or purpose. She woke up instinctively early, as she always had. For a moment, she reached for her phone to check emails. Then she remembered, and her hand froze in the air. There was no schedule waiting for her anymore. She made coffee out of habit, not desire. The sound of the machine felt too loud in the quiet kitchen. She sat at the table longer than necessary, staring into the cup. Time stretched in unfamiliar, uncomfortable ways. It felt like standing in an empty hallway with no doors. Days began to blur together quickly. She tried filling them with small tasks, meaningless errands. Laundry took longer. Dishes were washed too carefully. She avoided thinking too far ahead. The future felt like a room she refused to enter. Friends called, offering sympathy wrapped in optimism. She assured them she was fine, that something would come up. Her voice sounded convincing even to herself. After hanging up, the silence returned, heavier than before. Hope borrowed from others never lasted very long. She stopped answering questions she didn't want to face. "What are you doing now?" became a threat, not curiosity. She rehearsed responses in her head that she never used. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized. Confidence had quietly packed its bags and left. Evenings were the hardest part. There was no exhaustion to justify rest. She watched television without absorbing a single word. The glow from the screen replaced conversation and purpose. Loneliness settled in like a permanent guest. She wondered if this emptiness was temporary or permanent, if she just needed time, or if time would make it worse. The idea of starting over felt exhausting, almost insulting. She closed her eyes, wishing for certainty. Instead, uncertainty became her only companion. She avoided places where she might be recognized. The grocery store, the cafe, even the sidewalk felt dangerous. Any casual conversation could lead to unwanted questions. She mastered the art of quick smiles and short answers. Disappearing became easier than explaining herself. Her career had once given her language. Titles, achievements, responsibilities had shaped introductions. Now, she struggled to describe herself in a single sentence. The absence of words felt like failure. Silence replaced confidence without asking permission. She noticed how often she apologized for existing, for taking up space, for speaking too much or too little. She shrank in rooms where she once led discussions. The change frightened her more than the job loss itself. She was losing herself piece by piece. At night, memories surfaced uninvited. Late meetings, early mornings, moments of pride. She had believed those years were building something permanent. Now they felt fragile, almost imaginary. Had it all been conditional from the start? She felt embarrassed by how much it hurt, as if grief required justification to be acceptable. Others had survived worse, she reminded herself, but pain never listens to comparisons. It simply demands to be felt. She stopped dressing the way she used to. No more pressed clothes, no careful attention to details. Comfort replaced presentation. Invisibility replaced presence. She didn't want to be seen trying. Trying meant hoping, and hoping felt risky. If no one needed her anymore, did she still matter? The thought followed her through empty afternoons. She had no answer strong enough to fight it, only a quiet fear growing louder each day. Something essential was slipping through her fingers. Returning to the small Texas town felt like retreat. The roads were familiar, but her confidence was not. Every street carried memories she wasn't ready to revisit. This place knew who she used to be. She wasn't sure it would accept who she had become. The town moved slower than she remembered. People waved, smiled, asked polite questions. She nodded, answered vaguely, avoided details. The familiarity brought comfort and discomfort at once. It felt like standing in her past without protection. Her childhood home creaked with old sounds. The walls seemed to recognize her footsteps. She unpacked slowly, unsure of how long she would stay. This was supposed to be temporary, she told herself. Temporary felt safer than permanent. She sensed judgment even when none was spoken. Failure has a way of projecting its own voice. She imagined whispers that likely didn't exist. Still, the weight of them pressed heavily on her chest. Being known felt more frightening than being alone. She questioned whether coming back meant giving up, whether survival looked too much like surrender. The version of her who once left this town had dreams. Now she had questions and exhaustion. The contrast was painful and undeniable. She walked the streets one evening as the sun set. The air smelled of dust and warm pavement. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby. Life continued effortlessly around her. She wondered where she fit into it now. Maybe returning wasn't failure, she considered briefly. Maybe it was a pause she hadn't planned. The idea lingered but didn't settle. Doubt followed close behind hope. Nothing felt resolved yet. The suggestion came casually, almost accidentally. A neighbor mentioned a local program needing volunteers, children from difficult homes, struggling in school. They needed help, patience, consistency, everything she wasn't sure she had left. Her first instinct was to say no. Teaching wasn't part of her carefully built identity. It felt small compared to what she used to do, almost insulting to her past achievements. She smiled politely and changed the subject. That night, the idea returned uninvited, not as inspiration, but as irritation. Why had it bothered her so much? She told herself it wasn't her responsibility, yet the thought refused to disappear. She imagined walking into that room, children looking at her without expectations or respect. No titles, no authority, no recognition, just her, exposed and ordinary. The image made her uncomfortable in ways she didn't expect. Accepting felt like admitting defeat, as if this was all she was worth now. She argued with herself quietly, relentlessly. Pride fought necessity with sharp words. Fear watched from the corner, silent and patient. But something else stirred beneath the resistance, a curiosity she didn't want to name. What if this wasn't about falling lower? What if it was about touching something real again? The thought scared her more than rejection ever had. She didn't decide that night. She only acknowledged that the door existed, and that it was still closed by choice. For now, uncertainty remained her shelter. But the handle was already within reach. If this story is touching you in any way, let us know in the comments. Do you believe it's never too late to start over? She stood outside the building longer than necessary. The paint was chipped, the sign slightly crooked. Nothing about the place inspired confidence or importance. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door. Walking away felt easier than walking in. Inside, the room was louder than she expected. Children talked over one another. Chairs scraped the floor. No one noticed her arrival, and that stung more than she imagined. She waited for someone to tell her what to do. No instructions came. A woman introduced her quickly, without ceremony. No resume, no explanation of her past. Just a name and a vague reason for being there. She felt reduced to something undefined. It made her chest tighten. When she tried to speak, her voice wavered. The children barely looked up. She wasn't commanding a room anymore. She was asking for attention she hadn't earned. The shift felt humiliating. She attempted to follow the plan they had given her. It unraveled almost immediately. Questions flew, patience disappeared, order dissolved. She felt unprepared and exposed. Failure arrived faster than expected. One child laughed when she made a mistake, not cruelly, just honestly. Still, it pierced something tender inside her. She smiled anyway, forcing calm she didn't feel. Endurance had replaced confidence. When the session ended, relief washed over her. She gathered her things quietly. No one thanked her or said goodbye. She walked out unsure if she'd return. Doubt followed her all the way home. She returned the next day despite herself, not out of hope, but obligation. She told herself quitting too soon would look weak. Strength had always been her shield. Even now, she clung to it. Something felt different almost immediately. No one expected perfection from her. No one asked about her qualifications. They only noticed whether she showed up. The simplicity unsettled her deeply. In her old life, expectations defined value, performance determined worth. Here, effort mattered more than outcome. The absence of pressure felt strangely heavy. She didn't know how to exist without it. A child tugged at her sleeve mid-sentence, asking a question unrelated to the lesson. She almost corrected him, almost dismissed it. Then she stopped herself. Listening felt unfamiliar, but grounding. She realized no one was measuring her. There were no evaluations, no promotions to chase, just moments unfolding without judgment. That freedom should have felt kind. Instead, it made her uneasy. Without expectations, she couldn't hide behind success. She was simply herself, unprotected. Every insecurity felt louder in the quiet. Yet something about that honesty felt real. More real than she'd been in years. Driving home, she felt conflicted, relief mixed with discomfort. She couldn't decide if this place diminished her, or stripped away everything unnecessary. The question lingered, unresolved. She noticed the girl on the third day. Quiet, distant, eyes fixed on the desk. While others fidgeted, she barely moved. Her silence felt heavier than noise. It demanded attention without asking. No matter how gently she spoke, the girl didn't respond. No answers, no questions, no eye contact. It wasn't defiance, it was withdrawal, a kind she recognized too well. She tried different approaches, softer words, simpler explanations, patient pauses. Nothing reached her. The failure felt personal, like looking into a mirror she avoided. During a break, the girl sat alone. She didn't join the others, didn't complain or seek comfort. She simply existed on the margins. It stirred something aching inside her. She sat beside the girl without speaking. No lesson, no correction, just presence. The moment stretched quietly. Neither of them moved away. For the first time, the girl glanced up. Their eyes met briefly. It was not a breakthrough, just recognition. But it felt important. She went home thinking about that look, about how familiar it felt. To people unsure how to ask for help. Two lives paused in different ways. Something had shifted, though nothing was solved. The breakthrough didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. A whispered answer, a hesitant hand raised halfway, a moment easy to miss. She caught it instantly. Her heart reacted before her mind. She smiled without thinking. The girl noticed, and didn't look away this time. It wasn't mastery or success, just understanding something small, but the room felt different afterward, lighter, warmer, as if a window had cracked open. She praised the effort, not the result, something she'd rarely done before. The girl nodded slightly. No smile, but less tension. Progress, measured in breaths, not milestones. Later, another child asked for help. Then, another. She moved between them naturally, no longer performing, just responding. Time passed, unnoticed. She realized she hadn't thought about her past all day. Not once. No comparisons, no regrets, just the present moment. That realization startled her. Driving home, she felt something unfamiliar. Not pride, not ambition. A quiet satisfaction with no audience. It felt deeper than applause. She wondered why it mattered so much. The feeling stayed with her overnight. It made sleep lighter, thoughts restless. Hope hovered close, unwelcome and tempting. She didn't trust it. Hope had betrayed her before. The next morning, Fear followed her inside the room. What if this didn't last? What if she was fooling herself? Temporary relief could be cruel. She guarded her heart carefully. She pulled back without meaning to. Less warmth, more distance. The children noticed before she did. Connection weakens quickly when withheld. Guilt settled in her chest. She realized she was preparing for loss before anything had even been promised, protecting herself from disappointment. The habit was old and well practiced. Letting go felt dangerous. One child asked if she'd be there tomorrow. The question caught her off guard. She hesitated too long before answering. Yes, she said softly. The word felt heavier than expected. She understood then what truly frightened her. Not failure, not starting over, but wanting something again. Desire made loss possible. That night, she sat with the discomfort, acknowledging it instead of running. Something inside her asked for honesty. If this mattered, she couldn't stay half present. The fear remained, but so did the pull forward. Her phone rang while she was packing worksheets into a worn tote. The name on the screen pulled her stomach tight immediately. A voice from the old world, polished and confident, filled her ear. He spoke like no time had passed, like she still belonged there. She listened quietly, feeling two lives collide in her chest. He said her layoff had been a mistake, a restructuring gone too far. There was an opening, he explained, something worthy of her experience. The salary was generous, the title familiar, the ladder still standing. His words painted security like a clean, bright room. And for a moment, she wanted to step back inside. After the call, she sat at her kitchen table without moving. The Texas afternoon hummed outside the window, warm and slow. Her coffee cooled, untouched, as she stared at nothing. She imagined wearing her old clothes again, walking those halls again. The image felt comforting, and then it felt suffocating. At the program that evening, she watched the children more closely. They bent over notebooks, tongues pressed to lips in concentration. A few whispered questions, trusting she would answer kindly. The quiet girl from before sat straighter now, pencil moving. Something in that sight tightened her throat. A part of her whispered that this was small, temporary, replaceable. Another part argued that she had earned a real job again. She hated how quickly pride returned with its sharp edges. She hated how easily the old world made her doubt this one. It was as if her worth had been waiting for permission. She stayed after the session ended, stacking chairs slowly. The room smelled like crayons and dusty carpet, oddly comforting. She thought about the children's eyes when they understood something. No boardroom had ever looked at her like that. Still, the offer lingered, heavy as a stone. Driving home, she felt torn down the middle. The past was calling her by a name she used to answer to. The present was asking her to stay without promising anything. She gripped the steering wheel harder, afraid of her own decision. And she realized she had to choose what kind of life she wanted. She dressed carefully the next morning, as if clothing could bring clarity. Then she stopped and changed into something simple. No blazer, no statement pieces, no armor. She looked at herself and tried to see a person, not a role. The mirror offered no easy answers. She called the man back during lunch. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt inside. He repeated the offer, added benefits, mentioned her reputation. He spoke as if he were handing her a lifeline. She felt gratitude, and she felt trapped. When she said she needed time, his tone shifted slightly. Not angry, just confused. Why would anyone refuse a return to status and safety? She didn't know how to explain what she couldn't fully name yet. Some truths don't fit inside corporate language. That afternoon, the quiet girl stayed behind. She held up her paper without speaking. On it were letters, written carefully, imperfect but determined. The girl's hand shook, as if offering it cost her everything. She waited for judgment she had learned to expect. Something inside the woman broke open gently. She remembered her own fear of being seen as useless. She remembered the ache of wanting to matter. She knelt beside the desk and whispered, "You did this." The girl blinked hard and nodded once. In that moment, the choice became unavoidable. Not logical, not convenient, not impressive, but clear in a way her old ambitions had never been. She realized she could go back and feel important again, or she could stay and become necessary in a different way. That night, she made the call with trembling hands. She thanked him, truly, and then she declined. Silence followed on the line, then a polite goodbye. When she hung up, her heart pounded like she'd jumped off a cliff. And yet, for the first time in months, she felt strangely at peace. She expected doubt to punish her immediately, to wake her in the night with regret and panic. But morning came softer than usual. She moved through her routine without the old heaviness. The air itself felt a little easier to breathe. At the program, the coordinator pulled her aside quietly. She said the kids asked about her on days she wasn't there. They talked about her patience, the way she listened, the way she stayed. The words landed on her like warm rain. She hadn't known she was being noticed at all. A boy who used to disrupt every lesson sat near the front now. He didn't suddenly become perfect, but he tried. When he made a mistake, he didn't slam his book closed anymore. He looked at her, waiting to see if she'd give up on him. She didn't, and his shoulders loosened. The quiet girl began speaking in small pieces, one-word answers, then short sentences, then questions of her own. Her voice was thin, but it was real. She started arriving early, as if the room felt safe. Safety, the woman realized, was something you build slowly. One evening, the girl's grandmother came to pick her up. She hesitated near the door, eyes glossy with exhaustion. She said, "She talks about you at home." Then she swallowed hard and added, "I didn't know she still could." The woman felt her throat tighten with sudden grief. She walked back into the empty room and sat down alone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like distant insects. She realized her old job had given her numbers, reports, outcomes. This place gave her something harder to measure. A child speaking again felt like a miracle disguised as homework. Driving home, she understood her impact had been invisible to her. Not because it wasn't real, but because she wasn't used to this kind of value. No applause, no certificates, no public recognition. Just lives shifting quietly, day by day. And she felt humbled by how much it mattered. One rainy afternoon, she found an old box in the closet. Inside were awards, plaques, neatly folded conference badges. Her name shone in gold letters on polished surfaces. She sat on the floor and traced those letters with her finger. A strange tenderness rose inside her chest. She expected bitterness, but instead she felt gratitude. Those years had not been wasted, even if they had ended abruptly. They had taught her discipline, patience, strategy, resilience. She had learned how to carry pressure without breaking. Now she saw those skills differently. At the program, a child struggled with reading out loud. The words stuck, embarrassment rising in his face. She remembered presentations where she'd coached nervous colleagues, so she used the same calm tone, the same steady encouragement. The boy tried again, and his voice held. She realized she had been trained for this in unexpected ways, not for teaching math or spelling exactly, but for believing in people when they doubted themselves, for staying steady when someone else was shaking. Her past was not her enemy. It was her toolbox. That night, she called an old friend she had avoided for months. She told the truth without dressing it up. "I lost my job," she said, "and I thought I lost myself." There was a pause. Then her friend exhaled softly. "I've missed you," the friend said, and she believed it. She understood then how much she had been hiding. Not only from others, but from her own tenderness. She had treated vulnerability like weakness for too long. But here, vulnerability was the doorway to connection. And connection was what she had been starving for. Before bed, she returned the awards to the box gently, not as a burial, but as a goodbye with respect. She wasn't ashamed of who she had been anymore. She was simply no longer trapped by it. For the first time, her past and present felt like one story. The final session of the semester arrived quietly. The room looked the same, but she didn't. She watched the children file in, carrying backpacks and small worries. Their laughter and nervousness filled the air like music. She felt a wave of affection so strong it surprised her. They began with a simple exercise, a letter to their future selves. Some wrote quickly, others stared at the paper, afraid. She walked around the room, offering gentle prompts. "You can start with one sentence," she whispered. "Just one." She knew how hard beginnings could be. The quiet girl raised her hand, something she would never have done before. Her voice shook, but she asked if she could read hers aloud. The room went still in a way that felt sacred. She read slowly, speaking of dreams she barely dared to want. When she finished, her eyes searched the woman's face for a reaction. The woman stood there with tears she didn't try to hide. She nodded, not with praise that felt empty, but with recognition. "I believe you," she said softly, and the girl's shoulders dropped, as if those words released something locked inside her. The other children began clapping, uncertain at first, then louder. Later, as they cleaned up, The coordinator handed her a small card. Inside were messy signatures, crooked hearts, and misspelled thank yous. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't polished, it wasn't impressive to the world, but it landed in her hands like something holy. She pressed it to her chest and breathed like she had been holding her breath for years. Walking out into the Texas evening, she felt the sun low and warm. The air smelled like grass and distant barbecue smoke. She realized no title had ever made her feel this steady. This purpose didn't fit on a business card, and that was the point. It belonged to her, not to any company or role. At home, she set the card on the counter beside her keys. She looked at it the way someone looks at a new beginning. Losing her job had once felt like losing her identity. Now she understood it had been a door, not an ending. And she whispered into the quiet, "It's not too late," and believed it. If you made it to the end, thank you truly. If you're already subscribed, thank you for being here. If you're not yet, stay with us. And if this video touched you, share, leave a like, a comment. I read every single one.